What a crazy, insane college football weekend we all just witnessed, am I right? And to me, the craziest thing that happened, including all the upsets, including the Sun Belt going Super Saiyan with Georgia Southern beating Nebraska, Marshall beating Notre Dame, and Appalachian State beating Texas A&M, all college football, all in the preseason, were considered college football playoff contenders. We're all beaten by teams in the Sun Belt. Ridiculous weekend, upsets galore. Kentucky beat Florida, dogs and cats living together. It was mass hysteria. But the craziest thing to happen to me, to happen in college football, in my opinion, was the almost upset between Texas and Alabama. And this game was so close, and it was so competitive, it had me literally biting my fingernails. I'm an Alabama fan, and I love Alabama, and I wasn't expecting this game to be close. I expected Alabama to cover. They did not. It was a 1-point game. But I decided to put my bias aside, and I decided to look at this through a different lens and ask myself the question that many people are asking themselves right now. Is Texas back? And to that I say, no. No, they're not. And here's why, and please sit with me and don't just look at it as me as an angry Alabama fan talking about how Texas is not back. They're never going to be back. We should have blown them out. It was due to discipline. No, I'm not that kind of person. I'm here to talk about the reasons why. And before I get into the actual game, I'm a bit of a history nerd, so I'm going to explain to you why Texas is not back with a quick history lesson. So, many people in the media are calling Texas back after not even beating Alabama, but coming in within 1 point of Alabama. And to me, this reignites the curse of we're back. What do I mean the curse? Let's go back to 2015, shall we? So, in 2015, Texas hired Charlie Strong, a good, solid head coach at the time. He was hot on the market, and Texas had been struggling since they lost the BCS National Championship to Alabama in 2009, and they lost Mack Brown. He retired, but now he's back. But anyways, they finally hired Charlie Strong, and he was seen as the savior of Texas football. He would bring them into the new era, into the college football playoffs. And to start off the season, they played Notre Dame. And it went into overtime, and their quarterback scrambled out in overtime and reached into the end zone with his hands. And the announcer famously declared, "Texas is back, folks." And the rest of the season, they went 5-7. And then the next year, under Charlie Strong, they went 5-7. That is not back. That displays the curse Texas has. Whenever you say they're back, they are not back. And in 2018, after Sam Ehlinger beat a solid Georgia team, he famously declared, went on the Sugar Bowl stage and said, "We're back," and did the hook 'em horn sign. Texas was not back. In 2019, they went 8-5. Sounds solid, I know, but they went 5-4 in conference play, which isn't solid at all. Texas was indeed not back, and will not be back. So, by using the "we're back" moniker, you're basically cursing Texas's fate. So don't say it. Expect mediocrity at the moment. Programs don't just turn overnight. This season's gonna be solid, but don't say they're back. It's a curse. Trust me, I'm a Cubs fan. I know about curses. It takes time. Hopefully not 108 years, but it takes time. And you want another history lesson? Texas, they have a tough road up ahead. Let's take a look at their history against upcoming opponents on their schedule. So, first on the docket, Oklahoma. They've lost 4 straight. And now I know Oklahoma is an entirely different animal since they've lost Lincoln Riley. I think without Lincoln Riley, they stand a chance in winning the Red River Showdown. But without Q Ewers, this is a tough game. I could flip a coin and I could easily fight for one opinion. And it goes back and forth. But I'd give the edge to Oklahoma unless Q Ewers is healthy. Q Ewers transforms that offense. And I'll get back to that later. But he transforms that offense. And then Oklahoma State. They've lost the last 5 out of 7 to Oklahoma State, and they've lost the past 3 that have been in Stillwater. And don't even get me started on the losing streaks. So in 2021, they had a 6-game losing streak. In 2019, they lost the last 3 out of 5 after losing to Oklahoma. And then in 2020, they lost 3 games in a row in conference. And apparently that was enough to fire their head coach and bring in Steve Sarkisian, but that's a whole nother story. But speaking about Steve Sarkisian, how about we get into his history? Because I hate to break it to you, he's not a winner. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. I'm not saying he's never going to be a winner, but he doesn't even have that winning pedigree. Now, I went through the tediousness of going through his entire coaching history starting in 2009. So please bear with me. In 2009, as the head coach of the Washington Huskies, he went on a 4-game losing streak, missing out on a bowl game. In 2010, they finished 7-5, and he finished 5-4 in conference play. In 2011, he lost the last 5 out of the 7 and then missed out on a bowl game. And then in 2012, he went 7-5 and finished 5-4 in conference play. Do you see a common theme here? Disappointment. But then, in 2013, they had a solid year. They went 8-4, but once again, he finished 5-4 in conference play. It's ridiculous. He has these solid teams, but he can't compete in his own conference. And Washington, they're in the Pac-12. During that 2009-2013 stretch, there wasn't any dominant power. Sure, there was Oregon. They went to the BCS National Championship in 2010, but Oregon wasn't that good in 2009, 2011, or even 2012. Those were easy years that Washington could have shot up the rankings because USC wasn't that good. Well, USC wasn't that good in 2011, 2012, and 2013. Washington, that was their chance to finally win a Pac-12 championship, and Steve Sarkisian couldn't do it because he can't compete in conferences. But after that 2013 season, he went to USC, and it was a good year. It was a good year at USC in 2014. Credit where credit is due. Steve Sarkisian, although it wasn't his team, it was the previous head coach at USC who passed it on to him. He was able to coach up that team, and he led them to a 9-4 season to a decent bowl game. And credit where credit's due, but at the same time, that doesn't excuse him in 2015 for leaving the program after a 3-2 start, and then he went on a leave of absence for a year. Then he went to the Atlanta Falcons, coached around with them for a little bit, and then went to the Nick Saban rehabilitation coaching tree. So nowhere in that mix was a championship breed, championship pedigree. Now I hope Nick Saban taught him a couple things in Tuscaloosa. He had an amazing offense. And with Q Ewers, it looked like he had something brewing. Now, unfortunately, he got injured. I'll get to that in a minute. But without Q Ewers, Steve Sarkisian is not a winner. Steve Sarkisian, we haven't seen his ability to recruit and make the most out of his recruits. Let's compare it to somebody like Nick Saban. Nick Saban, he's able to get these huge recruiting classes, but then improve on them. He gets the most out of his players. Let's compare that to somebody who I think is a lot like Steve Sarkisian, Butch Jones, who is also a fellow alumni of the Nick Saban rehabilitation camp. Butch Jones was the head coach at Tennessee one time, and Butch Jones kept on getting top 5, top 10 recruiting classes, but none of his top recruits would be able to compete. He didn't get the most out of his top 10 recruits. It doesn't matter how many 5 stars you get. If they aren't good, you aren't going to be winning football games. And Nick Saban, he gets the most out of his players, and that's something Steve Sarkisian needs to take note of, getting the most out of your players. And that's a perfect segue to the actual game and why Texas lost. But before I get into it, and I know I'm leaving y'all in utter suspense and awe, I got to address the giant elephant in the room. And no, I'm not talking about Big Al. I'm talking about the referees. Whoa. This officiating was some of the worst I've ever seen in college football. And it went both ways. There was a lot more for There's a lot more going against Texas than there should have. And what I need to clarify that. The refs missed a lot of calls that could have gone, that could have changed the game for Texas. Plenty of pass interference calls in the end zone that they just blatantly missed. But then again, for Alabama, there was some holding calls that I saw against Will Anderson that seemed a little ticky-tack. They could go either way. There were some other calls that were missed. It was just a horribly officiated game. The Big 12, maybe they need to invest in some LASIK eye surgery for their refs. It was just a disappointment, but it happens sometimes in football, and we just have to live with it. And I know that's not the best mantra, but with refs, that's what you got to do. You can't change how they call the game because it's past tense. They're the guys in charge. You got to deal with it. I would say the same thing to an Alabama fan as I would a Texas fan. You just got to deal with it. These things happen because you know why? It just does. And with that tangent out of the way, there are 3 problems that Texas has had during this game. And number 1 was the run game. Bijan Robinson, the so-called best running back in college football, he only averaged 2.7 yards on 50. He had 57 yards throughout the entire game on 21 carries. That's not great, especially for a running back considered the best running back in college football. Now I consider him not even the best running back in his conference. I think Deuce Vaughn is miles better than Bijan Robinson. And if you don't know, Deuce Vaughn was a K-State running back, and needless to say, he shredded up the Missouri defense. And I won't be getting to him in this recording, but just know he's an amazing running back. And I don't mean to slight Bijan Robinson. The Alabama defensive line is tough. They have a good run defense, but not a good look. And Steve Sarkisian needed to manage that a little bit better. And one thing that Texas needs to take note of is blocking. Blocking is key in college football. They have some big guys in Texas. It was all about aggressiveness. I didn't see a tone that Texas's offensive line had. If you looked at Texas's defense, they sent a message. They sent a tone. But then you looked at Texas's offensive line, and I don't want to say their heads were in the clouds or they were lollygagging, but it wasn't as aggressive. If you're playing Alabama, you need, and if you watch the Georgia game, their offensive linemen, they set the tone. And it's about that. It's about that aggressiveness. And why a lot of people aren't talking about this offensive line problem with Texas is because Alabama had so bad tackling. Their tackling was so bad during that game. There was so many missed tackles in the backfield, and there could have been, frankly, twice as many sacks as there were during the game. And probably infinite more tackles for loss. So they're really thankful for that. And it's just something you need to work on. And this is their first big matchup of the year, so I'll give them a pass. But it's something Steve Sarkisian needs to work on and fix with his team. Their second problem was obviously losing Q Ewers. That was a big blow. But now for a quick tangent, what does this mean for the rest of their year? They're not going to be back this year. They're not going to be back because Q Ewers is gone. He's out for 4 to 6 weeks, and that's a crucial loss because during that stretch, if he's out for 6 weeks, he's going to miss the Red River Showdown. And that's an important game for not only Texas this season, but for college football because it determines the Big 12. And their backup, Hudson Card, he's a good backup quarterback, and he's a solid quarterback in college football. But although he's a solid quarterback, you can tell if you watch Q Ewers play and then Hudson Card play that the Texas offense was made for Hudson Card. Was made for Q Ewers. Excuse me. Whoa. Hudson Card, he's a great quarterback, but he is way different than Q Ewers. He would probably function way better under a different style offense, and something tells me Steve Sarkisian isn't going to change around everything for his backup quarterback. So, what is the last reason why Texas is not back? It's their schedule. It's a tough schedule, especially when you've lost Q Ewers. Who do they have to play? Well, they have to play all the bad boys in the Big 12. They got to play Oklahoma, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Baylor, and Texas Tech, and undefeated Kansas. Yes, I said it. Undefeated Kansas. Obviously, I'm just joking. I just wanted to say undefeated Kansas while they're still undefeated. Props to them for beating West Virginia. Quick side tangent. I just probably might not be able to say that ever again in my life. So, Texas' schedule, it's tough. There's no gimme games left. Texas is going to have to fight. They're going to have to prove something. And that's why they're not back. Because history, Steve Sarkisian's inability to manage the run game, and their offensive line not being able to get physical against a physical Alabama defense, and Q Ewers is gone. And plus their schedule on top of that. Those are not good things going for Texas right now. So they're not back. I'm not throwing the horns down or anything, but it is not looking good. I wouldn't be putting any money on them, and you could bet on that. Now, Texas, y'all played one heck of a game. And I have some Texas fans. Half my family lives in Austin, and they were texting me back and forth saying, "Are we about to do it? Are we about to win?" And of course, they were heartbroken, but I was happy to see it. I love Texas. I love seeing these flagship programs like Florida State, Nebraska, Michigan. I want them all to do well. Because when those flagship programs are doing well, college football does well. Now, obviously, Nebraska and Florida State haven't done good as much, but I hope that they turn things around. Like, I hope Texas turns things around. I hope they win the Big 12 this year. It's just the rational side of me can't root for that because it's just not going to happen. And I hope you've learned something, and thank you for listening. I hope you have a great day.